Why did Grandmaster Yoda believe that Obi-Wan was in fact a bad choice to train Anakin? Greetings, students of the Force, and welcome to the Archives. It's a very popular belief amongst us all that Qui-Gon would have been a far better choice to train Anakin than Obi-Wan was. This is proven many times in the lore, but it was also a belief of one Grandmaster Yoda, who absolutely hated that Obi-Wan was the one selected to train the Jedi Chosen One. When Qui-Gon first presented Anakin to the High Council, they ran him through all of the typical tests, but declared that he could not be trained because he was too old. But upon Master Qui-Gon Jinn's deathbed, he gave his last wish to Obi-Wan to train the boy in his stead. Because of the arrival of the Sith and Qui-Gon's sacrifice when fighting one, the High Council nearly unanimously agreed to acquiesce to his dying wish. All except for Yoda. We see in when Yoda was speaking to Obi-Wan on Naboo that the Old Master sensed grave danger in Skywalker's training. The Council had already approved it, and Yoda had tried one last attempt to dissuade Obi-Wan, only to begrudgingly allow him once he realized that Kenobi now had his master's defiance within him. In today's Holocron, we are going to dive into the mind of Yoda and explore exactly why he originally thought that Kenobi was the worst candidate possible to train Anakin Skywalker. Before addressing this, we have to bring up the concerns that the Council had for Anakin. The basic explanation we're given is that he is too old, but why was that such a hindrance if he was the chosen one? Despite the obvious reasons why the Jedi don't want to train children over a certain age, Anakin specifically had a lot of issues that Yoda recognized immediately. Because Anakin was older, he had already formed his own opinions and emotions about the galaxy. Being a former slave, Anakin knew what it meant to lack the necessities of life. While this may make him compassionate for the less fortunate, as Jedi are always supposed to be, he would have emotional ties, and these ties would force him to act not as a Jedi. Yoda was especially concerned if Anakin were to ever come across a group of slaves as a Jedi, and we know that Anakin would actually succumb to hatred when he did in fact encounter slaves in the Clone Wars, namely when he faced up to the Zygerian slavers. The other issue though was that the young Anakin had already known a family before the Jedi. He had emotional ties to them as well. His mother had provided him with a very loving environment, which would be a culture shock to Anakin when he was put in the Jedi Order. The Jedi Order was a place that did not cater to the young appetite for familial affection. But Yoda's biggest concern was Anakin's mother, as his thoughts constantly dwelled with her. This was dangerous when learning the subtleties of the Force, which is what led to a great deal of fear within Yoda when he first sensed Anakin. He was a storm of emotion, and he was very powerful. All of these combined were originally why the Council believed that training him would be far too much trouble than it would be worth. But this would all change with the death of Qui-Gon Jinn. Anakin would experience yet another traumatic loss after leaving his home, losing his father figure, as he was gutted by a Sith Lord within the very first days of Anakin's Jedi steps. Yoda was greatly concerned about the boy's mental state, and had dark misgivings about training him as a Jedi. He was an extremely delicate case, and if the boy were to be trained, it would need to be done by the hand of a wise Jedi Master, a Jedi that the Council would have to hand select. And if not Qui-Gon Jinn, then someone with similar or superior expertise to Qui-Gon Jinn. Everything that Yoda had in mind was the opposite of what Obi-Wan was. Obi-Wan was just freshly knighted. He had gotten out of his years as a Padawan himself, and not because he took the trials, but because he triumphed over Maul. But despite this, he was too inexperienced at this point to take on any Padawan, much less one as complicated and troubled as Skywalker. He needed some time to settle into the role of a Jedi Knight, and to learn the ins and outs of what it meant to be without a master. This is a hurdle that many fresh Jedi Knights go through, which is learning how to operate completely by themselves, without a guiding hand. They grow up having a master to tell them where to go, how and when to speak, and who to talk to on a mission. There's a bit of whiplash with new Jedi when they're completely on their own. For Obi-Wan, he hadn't even had a chance to go through this before he was declared that he would be taking a Padawan of his own. He was familiar and even rigid in the Jedi way, but rigidity doesn't equate to understanding. But this is overlooking an even larger issue that Yoda had with Obi-Wan training Anakin. Obi-Wan Kenobi had watched Qui-Gon Jinn die. The council report indicated that Obi-Wan looked on helplessly as Maul ran his saber through his master's chest. They knew Obi-Wan gave into his anger and had used an illegal lightsaber move to finish off the Sith Lord, and they knew Qui-Gon literally died in Obi-Wan's arms. While they were willing to excuse his use of the Psi Talk, which would cut Maul in half, surely they would have wanted Obi-Wan to spend a great deal of time in meditation. Obi-Wan needed time to sort out his feelings of losing his master, to take care of all of the residual emotions of facing an actual Sith in combat. Kenobi was traumatized after the incident, and while the Jedi have a bad reputation for burying their feelings, in actuality the Jedi deal with them by communing with the Force through meditation and soul-searching. For Obi-Wan to get a complicated Padawan like Anakin was a recipe for disaster, especially with his current mental state. But Yoda could do nothing, as Yoda had been outvoted. Kenobi was resolute with his decision to train Anakin, as to honor the last wish of Master Qui-Gon. Kenobi had even said that he would do so without the Council's permission, putting his own status as a Jedi on the line for the boy. Yoda let this happen, but kept a close eye on everything from that moment forward. Interestingly enough though, Master Yoda would again change his opinion drastically as he watched Obi-Wan and Skywalker grow together. From the outside looking in, it seemed as though the two were fine. Anakin was becoming a very powerful and a heroic Jedi, albeit rebellious and rough around the edges. But for Obi-Wan, having an apprentice gave him a chance to experience the Jedi way in a new light. It advanced his studies and ended up making him a Jedi Master much sooner than others. Instead of the two sabotaging one another due to their trauma, they bonded over it and became extremely close friends, true brothers. They helped each other deal with what happened on Naboo, and were a comfort to one another since they both had lost their father. Even though they didn't talk about it much, it's easy to tell that they both wanted to carry on doing the best that they could in memory of Qui-Gon. In fact, Yoda was so pleased with their development that this was likely what led him to assigning Ahsoka to Anakin in the Clone War, believing that he would learn as Kenobi had learned. He did this when Anakin was just barely a Jedi Knight, just like Obi-Wan. Yoda believed that Anakin would take the path of the Jedi more seriously if he had a young life and an impressionable mind on his hands. In a way, this did work. It made Ahsoka scrappy and independent, but this turned out for the best, as it was due to Anakin's training that Ahsoka would survive Order 66, and would be instrumental in aiding the rebellion in the era of the Empire. And we're seeing this now in the Ahsoka series, the fruits of Anakin's training leading Ahsoka to protecting the galaxy from complete annihilation. And all of this stems from Obi-Wan resolutely training Anakin so early. Obi-Wan, Anakin, and Qui-Gon Jinn were right. And had it not been for the influence of the Sith, Obi-Wan would have ended his life, a fine Jedi Master to Anakin. But that, my friends, is why Yoda thought Obi-Wan was the worst possible Jedi to train Anakin. All of these factors honestly make a lot of sense. Unfortunately though, Yoda would be proven correct all along. But the truth of the matter is whether or not Yoda agreed or vetoed this decision, Obi-Wan was going to train Anakin whether the Jedi liked it or not. Obi-Wan was ready to leave the Jedi Order to honor Qui-Gon's desire if it had come to it. So pretty much, nothing really would have changed. But tell us, what are your thoughts? How do you consider Obi-Wan's mental state following the Battle of Naboo, and how this would have impacted his training of Anakin? Let us know your thoughts in the comments down below. And as always, thank you for joining us today in the archives, and may the Force be with you.